they're dying off. There's hardly any of them left now.
And so they're looking for a forum to talk, and the U.S.
Well,
Congress...
they want Congress to at least acknowledge what they went through. I mean, here was an American ship attacked by Israel in open waters, international waters.
And this was done in the 60s.
Somewhere about
yeah.
there, I don't know.
But what is the official account that, I mean, how would they cover that up?
Gosh, I don't know that kind of detail.
So let me ask you, so what you do research and you present this information to the public. And you challenge them, if they can find something wrong, then bring it to your attention and you'll disagree.
No, that's true. And on 9/11, actually, I have challenged people at the State Department. There was an assistant secretary at a meeting here in town, and he gave a talk. Afterwards, I handed my book, and I said, I'd be happy to challenge you on this anytime. When I was in South Africa on my 3-week lecture tour, speaking to hundreds daily, the national radio station, SAFM, they wouldn't put me on. They said, we'll only put, because they didn't believe what I was saying. And they said, well, we'll do it if the American Embassy will provide someone to rebut you. Well, it went on. American Embassy never did provide anybody to rebut me. And what happened is the host of that radio show was invited to one of my talks.
Okay.
Thinking, well, this may sway him. And just before I was to go on, the host there had, the folks that had invited me handed the host of the radio show my bio and said, why don't you introduce him? So he was stuck, he couldn't get out of there.
Okay.
So he listened, and after listening to me, he turned around and started somewhat believing what I said. Before that, he was totally opposed to it. And after, when the embassy didn't come up with anything, they put me on.
So how would people describe, you know, from the, are you on some kind of watch list? Are you harassed at airports?
I assume so, but I live right by the Pentagon. I'm surrounded by military folks.
And the NSA is in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, they can come get me anytime they want. You know, with this Patriot Act, they don't have to have much of a reason. And now they've got this new law about material support of terrorism, which can be anything. It's not defined by the courts.
Right.
So it's whatever the FBI or the police want to define it as, that's material support.
So do you still travel on a regular basis? Who's seeking to hear from you? I mean, well, because, let me just, because I want to press you in another area. There are other people that are speaking out about 9/11. I mentioned to you about a young group, some young Caucasian students that did something called Loose Change. You know, how many other groups are you?
Oh, there are many, many. Let me talk about some of these groups.
Please.
There's the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Okay.
They're up to over 1,200 people who have signed on, architects and engineers. There's a group called Military Intelligence Government Personnel, and that's more than 200.
Well, the government don't tell us about these people, do they?
You come to our website, we lead you, show you all this.
Okay.
There's more than 200 pilots and aviation personnel. Don't believe the official account of how the planes hit the Pentagon and the towers. I mean, something hit. They're not saying there are no planes, but...
But they said it couldn't have happened the way they portrayed.
Right. At the Pentagon itself, there's no evidence of a plane. And I challenged the Pentagon historian. She was giving a talk in Arlington County about a new book she's coming out, a picture book. And I challenged her briefly during the Q&A, but afterwards we were on talking to each other for about 10-15 minutes. She refuses to answer my questions. There's a book called Firefight about the Pentagon.
Firefight.
And I challenged the authors of that. They said fine, but afterwards they wouldn't talk to me. So I'm open to discussion. I'm an engineer. I'm used to getting criticism, and we deal with it, and we try to get to the truth.
So as we're doing this talk, and there are many people that's going to see you, what do you want them to take away from this book? I mean, you're telling them they can download it, so but you don't sell it. No one can buy your book.
Well, they can buy it at Amazon, at any bookstore virtually in Europe and North America if they wish to buy it.
Okay, so it can be purchased.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and we sell them wholesale.
Okay.
But if they just want one copy, it's cheaper to go to the store and get it.
Yeah. So you do sell them wholesale?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, this one, 24 copies we sell for $110 delivered by priority mail,
Mm-hmm.
and 48 copies for $180, because my goal was to make it readily available. What do I hope people accomplish? You know, perhaps the most important thing is, it's not just about 9/11.
Yeah, that's
These unnecessary wars have cost us, I was looking at the latest numbers, about $7 trillion, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. When you add up all the costs already incurred and those that are going to be incurred when we take care of our returning soldiers, $7 trillion, you know, our total deficit today is about 13 trillion. More than half of that is by these two unnecessary wars.
You know, speaking of the war, I know you may have heard this. A lot of people don't realize that Iraq and Iran, when they were separated, I think in 1920 or something, that the people of Iran, some people end up living in Iraq, so these people are kind of connected already.
Well, yes, being from India, I know that
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah, with Pakistan.
Yeah, India and Pakistan are all one people.
Right.
Bangladesh.
But how do they portray it? Well, I know how they do it, but you know, since you do it so well, you know, and communicate,
Thank you.
explain to the audience, because as I just mentioned, Iran and Iraq, they make you think these are different people. And I just heard the other day where they were doing 60 Minutes, and the Kurdish people were selling oil to Iran. And they were all upset because, as you know, America is out of Iraq now, supposedly, even though there are a number of military bases that are still there. But they don't want Iran having a relationship with Iran.
Well, some of the, like in India,
Okay.
we have people that came in from the Arab countries in Mongolia. We have people in the northeast that look like Chinese. We have people in the south that are extremely dark with fine features. So we have all kinds of people, but we were one. There was considerable intermarriage, not that much because the Hindu religion was very strict about the caste system, but we weren't fighting because of our different races or ancestral origins. We did the same, you know, basically what happened is 1492 is a very important date.
Okay.
1492 is, you know, when Muslim Spain fell, and 1492 is the year that Columbus's voyages were launched.
Right.
And that's when the Europeans started spreading out into Africa, Asia, China. And for the next 400 or 500 years, they divided up those countries for their personal benefit.
And these are facts.
Right, these are facts. And if you look at the current boundaries in India, in Africa, they were all drawn by the colonial powers when we were being evicted around the 1950s. And they drew those boundaries to maintain, to create divisions among people, because by divisions they continue to support proxy armies.
Now, if you have done research and you see this, why isn't this taught more in the public schools? Why is America considered so uninformed about these matters?
Well, there's some natural reason and some contrived reasons.
Okay.
The natural reason is America's protected with two large oceans, Pacific, Atlantic, friendly country in the north, a weak country on the south. We didn't really have to worry about other countries for years.
Okay.
So, and we were the most powerful after World War II. So we went about our business without ever worrying about the rest of the world. So that was one reason. We thought we had everything, we don't need to learn from others.
Right.
But then there's the other reason. Now particularly, our governments do not want to know. When it comes to foreign policy, the government wants to set the agenda, the tone, and to control the knowledge. Because once people learn much about it, the more they learn, they realize that that enemy is just like us, no difference. And these wars are not for our benefit, they're for the benefit of a few at the top.
So that really does have merit when they talk about 85% of the masses of the people are dumb to this knowledge, and you have an elite 10% who dominate the rest of the world.
Exactly.
And you have this small percentage
Yeah.
trying to get the message out like you.
And when we start realizing that the real war is not between black and white or yellow or whatever, it's between the few that want to control the natural resources of the world for the benefit of the few. So it's greed versus justice. That's the real clash.
Now, I want to take you to a point, and you know, of course, the 9/11 is fascinating, unveiled, but this war on Islam is something that I don't think people can argue, because the average person is, you know, have such prejudice against Islam, and they don't really know anything about it. But it's the way it's portrayed. Just as I say, the mainstream press have a tendency of sanitizing the news, as I call it, you know. And there's very little that you can get out of a 22-minute broadcast, and most of it is dealing with sports and cracking jokes, you know. And what they call breaking news is really a joke. But still, you have the masses of the people that don't seem to be angry enough to demand more information. And you mentioned the internet is available, but...
Yeah, but that's changing.
That's okay.
See, as long as Americans are comfortable, they had money on the table, in their pockets, they had money for their sports and hobbies and food and their roof over their head, they were complacent. But now more and more are asking questions. Just this morning I read that the majority of Americans aren't interested in a war with Iran. And the government keeps pushing us there. So more and more are learning. Kids growing up in school today with the internet, with people from other countries, they have a very different attitude than, say, old folks like us. So that is changing, and our economy has a long ways to go before it's out of the woods.
You know, so when you hear the president and the governmental officials talk about peace, you don't really believe them, do you?
Well, they talk about a peace process. Now, why a peace process? Peace should be the goal. It's just like the process itself has become the goal. You just keep the process going.
Right. Okay.
And, well, the military-industrial complex is not interested in peace. You know, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, there was the fear of the military-industrial complex was, who is the enemy now? That's going to justify our spending. And they debated between the yellow peril and the green peril, China and Islam. And they picked Islam. So we had the creation of the Islamic fundamentalist threat, which became rogue states and nuclear outlaws, axis of evil, eventually the war on terror, and now it's war on extremism. So they have to have an enemy to justify defense spending, which is more than, which is roughly equal to the rest of the world's combined. And there's an interesting thing, when the Soviet Union collapsed, then Defense Secretary McNamara and his Assistant Secretary Lawrence Cord testified on the Hill, Congress, that our defense spending can safely be cut in half over 5 years. Now you can imagine what the chill that sends down the spine of military industrial complex.
But you know, it is really amazing how time flies, and it takes me back to when the Iraq War started, and you cited something about the propaganda of this ambassador's niece who spread the lies about that the Iraqi soldiers killed 300 babies in an incubator, and they knew it was a lie. Yeah,
the story was that Iraqi soldiers had tossed babies out of cribs and were taking the cribs back to Iraq. That was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador.
Right.
She had been
rehearsing
at Hill & Knoll, a PR firm right here in Washington, and that was her testimony. And there were more lies told.
And then they also said they had soldiers on the border waiting to attack. And
Exactly.
even the Soviet Union, with their satellites, denied it.
Right, right. They said, I think it was